Hi everyone, J.P. Laplante here of Laplante Guitars. For any guitar, the neck at some point will need to be readjusted. And the reason for that is that since the neck is made out of wood, it remains alive until it's burned, and therefore moves either as a result of internal stress and or humidity changes. So the purpose of this video is to show you how to do that adjustment yourself, should you want to do it. And let me reassure you that it's much easier than what you might think. And of course, a properly adjusted neck makes a world of difference in how comfortable the guitar is to play. Now, the first thing to do is to tune the guitar to pitch, or maybe say half a tone lower, and position the guitar on a flat surface like it's shown here on the video, with the neck raised a bit near the nut, and with the neck cap out at the first fret. What we want to measure is known as the relief, and the relief is the distance between the bottom of the high E string and the top of a given fret. Now, where do we want to take that measurement? That measurement should be taken at the point halfway between the neck to the body joint and the nut. In this case, the halfway point is around fret 6. Now this is, here in this case, the neck to the body joint is at fret 14, but if you have a solid body, for example, chances are the neck to body joint is at fret 16 or 17. So you would take that measurement, say, at fret 7 or 8, and even 9 in some cases. But in the case of that guitar, we're going to take that measurement here around fret 5. So how do we measure that? The best tool for the job is a feeler gauge. Now, these feeler gauges are really inexpensive, and if you ever want to do that, it's really a worthwhile investment. In this case, I know the distance between the amount of relief for that kind of guitar, so I've already taken that out to show you. So essentially, you press the high E string at the highest fret and measure the distance between the fret 5 and the bottom of the string. And in this case, 6/1000 of an inch is just about right. So in the case of that guitar, the way it's set up right now, the amount of relief is 6/1000 of an inch. Now, I've already done the setup on that guitar, and it is the optimum amount of relief for that instrument. And it provides a really nice string distance at the 12th fret of about the 16th of an inch, which is a really nice low action for an archtop. Now, what about if you find that there is no relief? That is, essentially, the string touches the fret all along the fretboard. Then, of course, the neck needs to be readjusted to give it a bit more relief. On the other hand, you may find that the amount of relief is really excessive, way more than, say, 6/1000 of an inch. In that case, the truss rod need to be readjusted as well. Now, as a final note, for those of you who do not have a feeler gauge, let me give you an idea of some thickness of common material. This is a really cheap business card, and it's 6/1000 of an inch thick. This is typical credit card thickness, and it's around 25–30 of an inch. And but still, I recommend highly, getting a set of feeler gauges if you want to do that. Now, I'm sure that you now have that question on mind: how much relief should I shoot for? Well, the answer is not that clear, and it depends very strongly on your playing style. Whether, for example, you're playing rhythm or lead, the type of picks you use. Do you use heavy picks or light ones? The string gauges The lighter strings, such as sets of 8 and 9, for example, have very large vibration amplitude in this area, and as you may guess, require a lot more room to vibrate without touching the fret. Heavier gauge strings, for example, a set of 1252, 1254, you know, these strings are under a lot of tension and don't vibrate as much, so they require less relief. But in all cases, you should have enough relief to avoid any buzz, but not too much so that the guitar cannot be tuned to low action. As a rule of thumb, the amount of relief should be anywhere between 3/4,000 of an inch and about 15/16,000 of an inch. 16,000 of an inch is 1/64th of an inch. Now you remember that kind of credit card looking piece of plastic that I have here had 26 thousandths of an inch. So, you know, in most cases this would be too much relief. But depending on your playing style, the strings you use, that may be appropriate for you. But as a rule of thumb, it should be between 3 thousandths of an inch and about 16 thousandths of an inch, which is 64th of an inch. Now, what does a truss rod look like? Truss rods come in different styles depending on manufacturer, but most modern quality guitars are fitted with a double action truss rod, like this one, for example. It's composed of two parts. The top part is a flat piece of steel, and the bottom part is a rod, a threaded rod. And it can be adjusted using, in this case, an Allen key that fits into this nut. So turning it one way will adjust the relief in one direction, and turning it the other way in the other direction. And this is something that we're going to have a look at later in the video. In the guitar that I have here, this truss rod is hidden or sit under the fingerboard like this. Okay? And of course, if you want to adjust the truss rod, you just have to remove the truss rod cover and you will have access to the nut to adjust the truss rod. On the other hand, some other guitars, for some other guitars, the truss rod is positioned in the opposite direction, and the adjustment nut is available at this end of the fingerboard rather than on the other hand, but the principle of adjusting it is the same. So how does a truss rod work? Now, in order to make that a bit more clear, I'm showing here a rough neck for a guitar that I'm building right now, and as you can see, there are three cavities in this part of the neck, and the truss rod will sit in the center cavity. And for those who wonder what these other cavities are, they're essentially meant to receive some carbon fiber rods, because in this case mahogany is a fairly, although it's a hard wood, it's a fairly flexible wood, and I think it's a good idea to reinforce it using some carbon fiber rods. But anyway, let's get back to the main topic here, the truss rod. So what I'm going to do now is to position the truss rod in the neck the way it will sit under the fretboard. Now essentially I'm positioning the truss rod in the cavity. It's a snug but not a tight fit, because the top part should be free to move. Now what I'd like to show you, hopefully it's going to work, what I'd like to show you is what happens when I turn the truss rod in this direction, which means clockwise. Let me do a bit more. Okay. Now, as you can see, I hope you can see it well, this part, the flat part, has taken an upward curvature. Now imagine that the fingerboard has been glued on the top of the neck. As you can imagine, the result of turning that Allen key clockwise will put some pressure on the top part under the fingerboard and force the neck to go to assume that curvature, that is to decrease the relief. On the other hand, if I turn the Allen key the other way, similar thing will happen, but the other way. That is, the rod that you've seen in the previous part of the video will push the neck in such a way that this area, the headstock, goes upward, then increasing the relief. So turning the truss rod clockwise decreases the relief, and turning it counterclockwise increases the relief. Now, before we go further and I show you how to properly adjust the truss rods, there are two important points that I'd like to emphasize. The first one is that the truss rod action range depends, of course, on the length of the truss rod, but is in any case limited to the flexible part of the neck. Now, if I press that neck down, you can see that it flexes mostly in this area, and this upper part of the fingerboard is not affected. And so that don't expect or don't try to solve problems related to the action in the upper part of the neck by adjusting the truss rod, because the truss rod will have no action there. In this case, the length of that truss rod was chosen to match the scale, in this case 25-inch scale, and a neck to body joint at the 14th fret. In the case of a solid body, most of them have a neck to body joint at fret 16, and therefore would require a longer truss rod. But again, I'd like to emphasize that the truss rod range is limited to the flexible part of the neck. This part is not flexible, so whatever you do to the truss rod is not going to change anything in this upper part of the fingerboard. And essentially, the most flexible part, this one, is the part that can be handled by the truss rod. The very last comment that I'd like to make is that the truss rod is not designed to force the neck into a given curvature, but it is there to hold the neck to a curvature that you are forcing the neck to take. Essentially, what this means is that as what you want to do is essentially press on the neck in order to give it the curvature that you want, and then turn the truss rod to hold the neck to that position. So I've seen in at least one video on YouTube that someone suggests of adjusting the neck without pressing on it. It may work in some cases with very thin neck that are very flexible, but the danger is that if you do that, you may end up using too much force to adjust the truss rod and damage it. And once the truss rod is damaged, it's over. It's either you get another guitar or get another neck. So now what I'd like to do with this very final part of the video is to show you actually how it's done. Now, the first thing that you want to do is to position the guitar as I show here, with the headstock part of the neck standing on something stable, and to flex the neck a bit, just to get a feeling of how flexible your neck is. And you're going to notice that, it flexes quite a bit, even though if I'm not very strong, I can flex it probably pretty close to 1/8 of an inch. Now, don't afraid you're not going to break the neck until you're really looking for breaking it, and you're going to have to be pretty strong to do that. So don't be afraid. You're not going to break the neck. So the idea is to put some pressure on the neck downwards, like this, for example, and then turn the adjustment key. And don't turn it more than 1/8 of a turn. So if I want to increase the relief, I have to turn this adjustment key clockwise and have the guitar sitting in this position with the face up. So the way I do it is I press on the neck, and as I keep the pressure, I turn the adjustment key. And I could have done it with my pinky. Essentially what I mean is that you shouldn't have to put much pressure on the adjustment key when you do that. If you have to do so, then there's something wrong with the truss rod itself. So again, don't, just make sure that you put the pressure on the neck and then turn the Allen key. So the truss rod is there to maintain that curvature. Now that you've told the neck you have to stay that way, the truss rod will do its job and keep the neck that way. Then what you have to do is just flex the neck a bit, just make sure everything is in place, and then measure the relief. Now if the relief is where you want it to be, you're in business, you're done. Now if you think that you need a bit more relief, you just repeat the operation. Now let's assume that you want to decrease the relief. Then what you would do is flip the guitar face down, repeat the same operation, but of course now you would press the neck this way down and turn the adjustment key counterclockwise. And repeating the same thing, reflexing the neck, making sure the relief is where you want it to be. And it's really fairly easy once you've done it once. Now that's, we're coming to the end of this video. I just hope that you haven't lost too much of your time and this video has been useful to you. And I wish you all the best and thank you for watching.